Um, President Donald Trump has invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to deport 238 individuals suspected of being members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua to El Salvador, despite a federal judge temporary order halting such removals. This action has sparked controversy regarding the administration compliance with judiciary rulings and the use of an old law to bypass modern due process rights. Critics argue that these individuals were denied due process, while supporters view the move as necessary for national security. So,
What's the difference between what he just did and what FDR did to the Japanese during World War II?
exactly.
And if the law is on the books and it hasn't been repealed, it's still good law. I don't care how long it is. And then you have Marbury versus Madison, 1803, decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, that says specifically a president is not bound by an unconstitutional statute or act or whatever. So what winds up happening is maybe let's see, the district court judge was in error. See, Article 3 of the Constitution deals with granting Congress the authority to create such inferior courts as may be necessary, because the only court to set up by constitutional edict is the Supreme Court. It does not have a specification of how many people are supposed to be on it, but historically the number has been 9. There was at least one period where they tried more, but it turned out to be totally unworkable, so they went back to 9. So that has been the precedent for American law: 9 members on an appellate court to hear cases. That means that you won't have a split decision. So you have inferior courts. Right under the U.S. Supreme Court is what you call the Circuit Court of Appeals. And you have 9-member panels ruling on matters that have come to them as appeals. But below that, you have what they call trial courts or district courts presided over by one judge. Those courts deal with setting up and establishing the facts of the case and the issues that are to be resolved. Now, before everybody gets talking about these judges need to be impeached, there's another side to this. We who support the Second Amendment are very happy with some of the district court judges who overruled the Biden administration and ATF with some of their cockamamie, unconstitutional gun control efforts. So when we start hollering about you need to impeach these fools for going off and trying to tell the president what to do, well, we've been applauding some who have done just that, but from our side. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And what winds up happening is the cases go up on appeal. And then ultimately, if it merits that, it'll get to the U.S. Supreme Court. If not, the Supreme Court will say whatever the Circuit Court of Appeals decided. And the Circuit Court of Appeals is not going to be able to say whatever the district court did without them being appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, which, since we have a 5-4 majority of conservatives, is quite likely to rule against them. Now, the authority that the president is attempting to exercise comes from his position as commander-in-chief of the armed services of the United States, and also in his position under the Constitution as chief diplomat of the United States. So what winds up happening is we have situations where we have had armed combat that has occurred, carried on by the United States military and naval forces, and there has been no declared war. The rule has become that the president, as commander-in-chief of the armed services, has that authority. So in this case, we have an analogy, which is there is a problem here that needs to be addressed because it impacts the national security and the integrity of the United States as an entity, which demands his intervention as Commander in Chief of the Armed Services and as head diplomat. That means he's responsible for conducting this non declared war. So that might be his strongest avenue when it comes to the theoretical basis for what he's doing. Plus, he still has a valid law, which just happens to be 227 years old.
So let me read this. It says U.S. District Judge James Boseberg on Saturday ordered the Trump administration to immediately halt efforts to remove those Venezuelan migrants until he has more time to consider whether Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act was illegal. The lawsuit brought on behalf of five named Venezuelan immigrants was provisionally turned into a class action, meaning it serves as a block on deportation of all non citizens in a U.S. custody who are subject to Trump's proclamation invoking the rarely used law. Any plane containing these folks that is going to take off or is in the air needs to be returned to the United States. However, that is accomplished. Make sure it's compiled with immediately. Now,
well, you know what the remedy is? Put them all in tents in Guantanamo down in Cuba, where we have a naval base.
well, yeah, because some are going there, but so people were saying, well, what? So, okay, if they bring them back, you're going to let them go. And
No,
basically,
you don't let them go. Doesn't say that.
they're going to be detained here until the legal thing is worked out.
Yeah,
But
that's what his ruling is. That doesn't mean it's going to stay that way on a quick appeal.
so I want to play this clip here. This is Tom Holman, who is the border czar.
You say to those who claim you're using a 200-year-old law to circumvent due process?
An old law? Not as old as the Constitution. We still pay attention to that, don't we?
But some would say this is...
How many more terrorists do you plan on?
Good answer.
Yes, I'm loving it.
Constitution is 236 years old.
Exactly. But I don't. They need to be deported.
Bill of Rights is 3 years younger. The Constitution was ratified in 1789 and the Bill of Rights was ratified in 1791. So what winds up happening is, well, 2 years older. So you get 138-year-old Bill of, well, not 138, you get 2 years less. So you get 134-year-old Bill of Rights. Are we supposed to give up the Bill of Rights? That's a great answer. You sharp.
Yes, and it's like these reporters are just so stupid. Like
they are. Do they have, what kind of IQs do they have? Is this the profession for the idiots, or is it for those who can write? Seems like everybody that knows how to write and has logic has drifted to the Wall Street Journal,
right,
or Newsmax, maybe.
Right, or News Nation. So yeah, so it's like, does President Trump have the right to deport criminal gang members?
Roosevelt had the right and set the precedent for locking up American citizens in detainment camps in World War II. They paid reparations for that. He certainly has a right to repel a foreign invasion. And see, his point is these people are in fact members of organizations that have committed acts of war upon the United States abroad and not just locally, meaning domestically. So he certainly is entitled under his authorities as commander-in-chief to take action against the active enemies of the United States. And that's like Pearl Harbor happened December 6th. So between December 6th and the declaration of war, a day or so later, is that to say Roosevelt could not have ordered the U.S. Navy to retaliate against the Japanese Navy just because there had been no declaration of war issued in the interim? No, it does not. Was there a declaration of war when it came to Korea? No, there was not.
Right. I want to play this clip here of the president speaking.
Well, this is a time of war because Biden allowed millions of people, many of them criminals, many of them at the highest level. They emptied jails out. Other nations emptied their jails into the United States. That's an invasion. And these are criminals, many, many criminals. Murderers, drug dealers at the highest level, drug lords, people from mental institutions. That's an invasion. They invaded our country. So this isn't, in that sense, this is war.
Yeah, so
That's not his strongest argument. He should have said our intelligence indicates that some of these people are members of organizations that have committed open acts of war against the United States. Was Gulf War I a declared war?
mm-hmm.
Seems we knocked Hussein's folk around a bit
Right.
and had one of the biggest tank battles in history.
So this is
what was that?
This is actually a video of the 238 illegal gangs in the Trey something, however you pronounce that gang, getting deported back to El Salvador, because a lot of those countries, including Venezuela, they opened up their prisons and say, hey, join the caravan, go to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And then
and dumbass number 2 in the White House or in the observatory okayed it.
Right. And so they cause havoc, taking over apartment complexes, causing crimes, increasing gun sales, drug sales, murders, all increasing the crime that we already have to deal with. So
actually, it's grounds for impeachment of both of them. That other thing of committing misdemeanors and felonies in office. It's not treason. Treason is one of the 3 bases for impeachment of president or vice president. Treason is strictly defined in the Constitution as the only crime specifically denoted and defined in the Constitution. It is not bribery, though that might be shown peripherally, but it certainly is in violation of the laws of the United States to give aid and comfort to the aliens and also to compromise the security of the country, knowingly do that. And it's obvious that if you let in 1.5 million military-aged Chinese, all of these people who belong to South American gangs that have engaged in armed conflict with, see, the strongest thing he has is if he alleges that these people have engaged in armed conflict against the United States, most specifically against our external law enforcement agency, DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, down in the area where they have been invited by the impacted government down there to assist in resistance to criminal activity that winds up in the United States.
mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad they up out of here, and it's still some here that needs.
Yeah. In other words, he'll answer for it later. This is not unlike what Obama did, but he, I think, was more egregious. He was under a specific injunction by a federal district court judge to not kill 2 American citizens for his discretionary opinion that they were a threat to the United States. They were American citizens, not naturalized, but born, and in fact, in Detroit, Michigan. One of them was the father, and the other one was the son. The grandfather of the youngest and the father of the middle one filed an injunction against the Obama administration. The Obama administration says they weren't bound by due process of law, And if they chose, the president could have an American citizen who had committed no crime that was chargeable in the United States murdered if, in his exclusive opinion, that person was a threat. So they murdered the man by drone, and 4.5 hours later, they murdered his 16-year-old son.
So it says here, Miami immigration attorney Ronaldo Vasquez says he believed communist dictator Nicolas Maduro deployed the Tren de Aragua gangsters as foot soldiers to destabilize the U.S.
Yeah, it could be. See, there's all of that. And the other thing is that it's only a preliminary injunction saying don't take them back there, but it doesn't say you have to let them go. So that means park them on somebody's vacant army base, air base, Marine Corps base, naval base, transport them to the moon.
Well, they are going to be detained. So it's
They're
like,
going to be detained.
But my thing is, why are you demanding to bring them back? What legalities?
In other words, they're still under the jurisdiction.
Oh, because it was a lawsuit.
Yeah. So in other words, you can't just deport them. Not that this hasn't been done. Hell, they did it in my courtroom. I had 4 men on trial for committing 4 contract murders. Got caught in the middle of trying to do number 5. They were doing it for Oppenheimer De Beers in South Africa. This was back in 1990. And what wound up happening is we go 3 weeks deep into a murder trial, organized crime hit, which is death penalty. And what happens is we can't continue the trial because the State Department comes in and grants diplomatic immunity to the 4 assassins and transports them back to South Africa. So we literally were in the midst of a murder trial. How it got discovered was 7 guys had a mining permit from the U.S. government. They found diamonds on some federal land. They got the licenses to mine the diamonds. Oppenheimer De Beers gave them an offer they couldn't refuse. They refused, so Oppenheimer De Beers sent 4 assassins over. They had killed 4 people outright, shot the 5th one, and were getting ready to put a bullet in his head when Memphis police, who were next door answering a domestic disturbance call, heard the gunshots, rushed in. The assassins just dropped the weapons. They didn't give a damn. When we wound up going to trial and hearing about how De Beers got involved in this whole thing, it was a strong case. They got caught with the smoking guns and dead bodies. And we couldn't finish the trial because the State Department said we grant them diplomatic immunity. And they took them from the Shelby County detention facility and they put them on airplanes and took them back to South Africa and let them go. Real James Bond stuff.
What does that have to do with the...
Well, in other words, what I'm saying is right here, that's what is going on. That same kind of thing where you have the State Department getting involved. In other words, the State Department could let them go or say, we're not letting them go. You see, I was giving you both ways.
Okay.
In other words, that's how much...
Sometimes the stories that you tell is interesting, and I get caught up in the story, and then it's like, okay, relate that to why you giving that story as an example. But yeah.
In other words, the primacy of the U.S. Department of State, headed by the President of the United States in determining matters of foreign policy as to who is to be treated as a criminal and who is not.
I think that judge should have, it's not the judge's fault. Whoever brought that it was a civil lawsuit representing Venezuelans. So I wonder, those 5 Venezuelans in that lawsuit, which is the reason why the judge halted the transportation, were they part of the gang? Because
Yeah, well, see, all of the above. Remember, what we have is a rule. If you're subject to the jurisdiction of the United States or the laws of the United States, then you get what the laws require. It's called due process.
for
And what is
everyone,
it? You're innocent in our system. You're innocent till you're proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And at this point, the gravamen of the thing is they're supposed to be dangerous individuals who are members of this particular cartel, gang, coalition, or guerrilla force, whatever it may be, and you haven't put on any proof under oath that they are. You have not had any hearing to determine whether there's even probable cause. And you may have some innocent people swept up in it whose lives may be in intense jeopardy if they get taken back home. So first you need to make these determinations of at least getting probable cause that what you allege is likely to be the case. Now, if they're illegals, then that becomes also a matter to be proven. If they're illegals, then hell, in my opinion, with the law, they shouldn't even be here anyway. At that point, you can just boot them back to wherever they are
right?
supposed to be.
So